All right, welcome to another episode of the Mindset Breakthrough Show. My guest today, super excited, Nicholle Harris. Nicholle, I also know through Rise Comedy. She does improv comedy there. She's absolutely delightful and fantastic to watch. And she's got a master's in social work and does has done a lot of like emotional. Shoot, I already forgot the title. It was like emotional learning for I think it was youths, and you can describe it better than I can.
Yeah, I teach social emotional learning through improv and theater to youth in the education system, and I do restorative theater work with youth in our criminal legal system.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
cool stuff. Okay, so yeah, Nicholle, if you want to share, just sort of take it away with the breakthrough you had from therapy. If you want to share like a little bit of like the problem leading up to it, what the breakthrough was, and then the impact it had, and I'll jump in every now and then for questions as
Cool.
that come up.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I've been in therapy for 12 years. And I've been in group therapy with the same group for the past 8 years, I think, at least. Um, and I've had so many breakthroughs, and I know I'm just going to focus on one, but therapy has really helped me create my life, and continuously does so. So I kind of believe in therapy like it's like going to the gym.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. That's
yeah,
I love that way of looking at it. Yeah, and that makes
yeah.
a lot of sense.
Taking your
Cool.
emotions to the gym.
Yeah, I love that. Is there, yeah, so is there like a specific like breakthrough? I know you've had like a ton, and that's kind of always the thing of like, yeah, how do you pick this one?
Yeah.
But yeah. Is there one that kind of stands out or one that was like really big that stuck with you?
Well, it was like my first big
Mm,
breakthrough because I think that that's when I was like, oh, this is why people go to therapy, you know?
nice.
Because back in 2009, I got out of the military, I moved to DC, and my father died all within a 30-day period. And I started a new job, and I didn't know anyone in that many people in DC.
That's a massive life change. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it was a lot. And so, my family and people from afar, my mom was like, you need to go to therapy. And so I decided I was gonna like, interview a bunch of therapists, try to find one that I felt a connection with. I interviewed like 8 therapists. Um, and the last therapist that I interviewed said something like really pointed to me that I didn't want to hear. So I was like complaining about how I was always in these cycles of bad relationships and I'm grieving my dad, and I'm explaining everything to her. And she was like, oh, well, it sounds like you feel comfortable in emotionally neglectful relationships because that's what you're used to. And I was like, she doesn't know me. How dare her? I've only been talking
Yeah.
to her for less than 30 minutes. Like, you know, and so like I walked out really angry. I called my mom and I was like, you know, I don't know if am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah.
I was like, fuck her. She doesn't know me. And I was mad. I think I felt defensive for my mom because my mom was a single mom, and though me being emotionally neglected was a result of our circumstance. For me, I thought it was like demonizing. I always was like, wow, my mom raised 3 kids all on her own, and
Yeah.
so I wouldn't accept the idea that my mom did something wrong, you know and I was like, oh, well, I'll look into therapy eventually. And so I just after that, decided I didn't need therapy. And for like 2 years, I just lived my life and ended up in a really unhealthy relationship. And I was just going through the same exact cycles that I was tired of. And finally, I was like, I should go talk to that lady that pissed me off.
Oh yeah. That's so cool. That just like kind of hung in your mind, and then like yeah, you see that same pattern. You're like, oh yeah, okay, she might have had a point there.
Yeah, yeah. And so I went back to her, and then our first session, I just like cried like the whole hour.
Oh wow.
I was like, I thought I would tell her what I needed, but I ended up just crying.
Like just kind of like unloading like years of stuff sort of a thing,
Yeah,
or
yeah, and I think like even admitting that I had been emotionally neglected was like so painful,
yeah.
you know, and learning to stop like judging. So like, yeah, I was emotionally neglected and my mom emotionally neglected me, but it didn't make her wrong. It
Yeah.
was just something she did. And
Yeah.
it and when we do things, there's like a response or, you know, a consequence, but actions don't necessarily have to have judgment to them, you know, it
Like
doesn't.
yeah, like it doesn't have to like change the way you see your mom or anything like that.
Right. Like it's just something that happened
Mm.
as a result of our situation, you know? And
Yeah.
so I can say, you know, my mom was supporting us, therefore I was emotionally neglected, and it doesn't make her wrong,
Yeah.
you know? It's just a result of the
The
situation and the
circumstance.
circumstance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so like cool. Like, yeah, like the as you were saying before, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, my mom's like great. I didn't have any issues. Like, yeah, you're like your mom was great, and there was emotional neglect because like she's just one person and can only do so much. Like, yeah, both can be true. I had a very similar sort of realization before where I was like, what do you mean? My childhood's perfect. And then you know, people that study family dynamics are just like, okay.
Yeah.
And then as you start to unwind that stuff, like, oh, okay, yeah.
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 And it's kind of neat because it even has opened up my relationship with my mom to be
Mm,
able to say, you know, because I was raised by a single mother, like you know, we as especially as children that don't understand, you know, the world, we do the best of our developmental level. A lot of times we internalize and like blame things on ourselves and take things in and go, well, this is just the way the world works, you know, and it's cool like as an adult to realize like, I'm an adult. My world doesn't have to work that way.
ooh. Does anything stand like example come to mind for that?
Um, I mean, yeah, I guess like so many things. But I think I could tie it back to like I guess all my breakthroughs are kind of connected in a way, which is super interesting.
Oh,
But like in relationships, often I would end up with these guys who um would be really wishy-washy. They do like super caring things for me, but then they'd be like, well, but I don't want to be in a relationship.
mm,
But they'd introduce me to their parents or like invite me over for Christmas, just the two of us, you
yeah.
know, and like do these like
Do
big
very
grand
relationshipy
gestures.
things.
Yeah. And then they'd be like, oh, the whole thing about a relationship, you know. Um, and other ways in which, you know, we just didn't want or need the same things. And I remember talking to my therapist, and I still have the same therapist.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah, it's cool. But I remember talking to her about this and being like, well, I really like him, but you know, I want this and this, and you know, he just doesn't really want that. And you know, I kept talking, and then finally, after like 40 minutes of me talking, she was like, okay, so I hear that you're very clear on what you want. Like these are all of the things that you listed that you want. And he's very clear that he doesn't want to give those things to you. So what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it was like,
Nice.
and I'd never broken up with somebody before.
Oh wow.
And it was like, I think, and broken up, right? We weren't even in a relationship. but but it was tied to that whole idea of emotional neglect where a lot of emotional neglect, I think, obviously like you can be in an emotionally neglective relationship and that's not your fault necessarily how the other person is acting, but it is in our power to decide whether or not that relationship works for us,
Yeah.
or to decide what needs to be changed for our own like emotional well-being.
So was
So
it like a little bit of like, yeah, kind of falling into these similar relationship patterns? And then the sounds like, if I'm getting this right, like the therapy kind of like helped you recognize that pattern and do something about it versus being like the why are all guys like this kind of a thing.
yeah, and like I think with my dad, because my dad wasn't around a lot growing up, I would, he would talk to me every like maybe a couple times a year, every so often. And I would always make it so clear that I wanted to spend time with him. And he'd be like, yeah, yeah, sure. And then he'd just like not show up, or then like not answer the phone for a long time. And as a kid, that's like something you kind of just have to like deal with, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that those core root wounds kind of become our vulnerabilities when we become adults.
For sure. So yeah, was that the kind of pattern that was like coming up again of like you're like texting and like the guys are just kind of like not responsive or whatever, and you're just like that's how it is, or like that's what you're comfortable
Yeah.
with.
And then when I would finally talk to them, they'd be like, oh, but I really like you and I really want this. But all their actions were not messaging that.
Yeah.
And and I'd get so confused and I'd be like, well, he said, this,
Yeah.
you know, and it didn't really occur to me that there might be people out there who do what they say they're gonna do, you know.
Yeah. So
um
did that awareness then kind of like change things? Like was that kind of all you needed, just awareness of it and to kind of check in with it to be like, oh, and let's make sure I'm like spending time with these other types of people now.
oh, absolutely. And it was interesting because with that specific guy that I'm talking about, like I remember it very well. um I just said to him, it seems like we don't really want the same things. And that was our breakup conversation. And I didn't go into it like being like, oh, I'm going to break up with him. I just went into it being like, I'm going to point out these, incongruencies.
Yeah.
And it was a breakup. And then after that, if I really liked somebody and I said, like, these are the things that I want, and they were like, oh, that's not what I'm really looking for, I would like actually hear it,
Oh yeah.
and be like, oh, okay, well, it was really nice knowing you, or, we can still be friends, or, you
Yeah.
know, um,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah, I think sometimes when you're stuck in those ways of being, you don't even realize that you're not even really like taking in and listening to what someone's telling you.
How do you mean?
Like like guys that would say, I really, really like you, but I don't want a relationship.
Right.
And both things can be true.
Oh yeah.
And
So
I would
like
be
you were
like,
just hearing that I really like you, or
yeah. And I'd be
hmm.
like, well, it's weird that, and I would hear that I really like you, and I would continue to spend so much time with them. Um, and you know, whatever that was for them, because like we were like technically doing a relationship without calling it that. But what I wanted was the ability to dive in and to say that that's what it was. And so if you can like clearly hear that someone's telling you that that's not where they're at, I feel like it's better for it's like truly listening to each other, so it's better for everyone.
Yeah, totally. And what kind of therapy was this? Was this like talk therapy or a specific type?
Yeah, it's social therapy.
Okay.
And so my therapist, she's been a therapist for almost 40 years, maybe more. And she has an LCSW, but also has like looked into like trauma and stuff like that. And she got her degrees from Howard and NYU, and studied multicultural um, forms of like talk therapy and stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, she's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's like? Do you want to talk just a little bit more? I know we're gonna go soon, but that bit about how you say it's like it's like going to the gym. Like therapy is just something you like stay with. You can just tell me more about that?
Yeah, like I feel like I feel like you can never stop growing and learning emotionally. And I get different tools all the time. And when you're struggling with a situation, I feel like it's really helpful to walk through it with someone who's not intertwined in your life.
Yeah.
And they're able to kind of, like, sometimes I lose who I am. It's cool to have a therapist who knows me so well because she constantly gives me who I am.
Yeah.
And or we consider like, well, I'm stuck in this situation. How do I feel powerful in it? Like what needs to happen in order for me to help lead me and whoever through this? Um and when I go to group therapy, which I've been doing for 8 years, like I'm also like sometimes I come to group and we don't talk about my problems at all. And I'm learning how to be curious, what kinds of questions are helpful, what kind of questions aren't helpful, because they'll say that's not really helpful,
Mhm.
or my therapist will say that's not really helpful because it's not diving into the emotion of what's going on. um, and you start to learn how to be just a better friend, a better person in relationship all around, which is part of, I think, one of the most important things in my world. So,
Awesome. Oh,
yeah.
cool. We might have to do a whole nother episode sometime on group therapy because that sounds really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be open to it. I love therapy.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I mean, that was very concise and great. Is there anything else you want to share about this particular? Yeah. What was like when you said like, oh, this is why people go to therapy? What kind of made you had that? Like, was it kind of breaking down in the first time? Was it just realizing that pattern? Like, what kind of helped you
Yeah, it
do
was like
that?
seeing that pattern and honestly setting those boundaries and breaking up with that guy, like all those things were like really, really hard for me.
Yeah.
And my therapist was like, just do it on behalf of yourself and see if over time you feel like better. And I
Mm,
did, like I felt more grounded, more in control of how things were going for me,
yeah.
and so it was like, oh, you do these, you're given these tools and you do things that are uncomfortable at first, and then you see um like how it really changes your life.
Yeah. Did that
Yeah.
make it easier to like set boundaries like in other areas? I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, um I think that that was when I really started to really like learn about what are boundaries and
Yeah.
what can I that I'm allowed to put expectations on a relationship and then see if that person will meet them. I can say, "Hey, I can ask if I can have an expectation of a relationship."
Yeah.
You know? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can have like yeah your own standards. Yeah, boundaries are the shit. They're just great.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are.
For so many people, like yeah, it's the thing that like once you learn stuff to do, it's like oh wait, this I don't have to just get like burn myself out making people happy or get like pushed around and all that kind of stuff. Like I can, it kind of goes back to that point earlier of just like you kind of puts you in control. Um,
Yeah, and often like the person you're in relationship with, if you're really struggling, it's likely that that's a mutual feeling.
mm,
So, um it's cool to learn that like, oh, setting a clear boundary and tells a person exactly where I'm at and it helps us have a better relationship.
totally. Yeah, awesome.
So,
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, is there anything else you want to share before we go?
no, just thank you so much for bringing me on. This is a super cool topic and I'm looking forward to like seeing what other people have to say.
Heck yeah. Yep. There's a
Yeah.
bunch of good shows lined up. So I'm excited.
Cool.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much, Nicole.
Okay.